Tuesday's race in Arlington featured a myriad of controversial off-track excursions and even more controversial penalties to accompany them. No less than 3 prominent riders faced backlash after seemingly forgetting that there are cameras on them at all times and ripping the throttle down the wrong side of the tough blocks in 3 different races. Let's take a look at the 3 incidents before we begin to break down the implications. First, Brandon Hartranft was forced wide and off his line in the 450 LCQ by Cade Clayson, and instead of tucking in behind the 280, he decided to go around the obstacle entirely, narrowly avoiding a downed rider and an AMA official nearby. He was docked 2 positions, removing him from the 450 main, opening up the spot for the other rider in this situation, Cade Clayson, to make his 3rd consecutive 450 main event. In the next race, the 250 main event, red plate holder Cameron McAdoo went down near the end of the whoops with his bike sitting on top of a tough block. By the time Cam got his bike back on 2 wheels, he was facing the entire wrong direction, turned a 180 away from the section before cutting diagonally across the start straight and rejoining the track alongside championship rival Justin Cooper, entering the next corner. Cam came across the checker flag in 7th, but was docked 3 positions and credited with a 10th place finish, ultimately losing the red plate to Hunter Lawrence in the process. And finally, in the 450 main, Aaron Plessinger makes contact with Vince Freeze, putting him on the ground. Brock Tickle runs into the back of him, and Jason Anderson is forced to stop to avoid hitting them both. Instead of the logical thing to simply go around them, Jason pivots, ollies a Mike's harder tough block, and then races down the straight next to the whoops, dangerously close to an unsuspecting flagger. Anderson, who was down in the first corner and dead last, came all the way back to pass Plessinger just before the finish for 6th, but was instead credited with a 7th after a 1-spot penalty. So, 3 similar incidents with 3 different outcomes that leaves a lot of fans confused. Let's take a look at the rulebook to see if we can find some clarity. You will find the appropriate rule in the 2021 AMA Supercross rulebook in section 4.15 on-track regulations. Under Rule I, the entire text reads, "A rider leaving the course may continue the race by properly re-entering the track at the closest safe point to where the rider left the course without gaining an advantage. While off course, the rider may not accelerate in an unsafe manner as deemed by race direction. If a rider accelerates in an unsafe manner while off course or cuts part of the race course, the rider may be determined to have gained an advantage without gaining a position. It will be the duty of the race director to make a determination as to whether a rider gained an advantage by leaving the race course and re-entering. The minimum penalty for gaining an advantage while off course during a race will be the loss of a number of positions gained plus 1 additional position in the final result for that race based on the severity of the advantage gained as deemed by the race direction. If no positions were gained, the minimum penalty will be the loss of 1 position in the final results for that race based on the severity of advantage gained as deemed again by race direction." So let's get back and see how this all worked out with the incidents. Brandon Hartranft left the track in 5th and came back in front of Clayson for 4th. He was docked that position, plus an additional position, putting him back to 6th and out of the 450 main. Wow, the AMA actually did this one by the book. Hartranft very clearly accelerated around the obstacle and gained back his position. A smarter move here would have been to tuck in behind Cade and maybe even cross his line and pass him on the inside to the next corner. This would have masked any potential off-track acceleration, and Braden likely could have found himself in the main instead of Cade. An equally controversial call that would have led to an uproar from the fantasy crowd as Cade had a hefty pick trend. The next one to look at is Cameron McAdoo's cut across the start straight after his crash in the whoops. And you can see Chris Blows go past before Mac remounts, putting him in 8th. He gets up, crosses diagonally, and rejoins in front of Cooper and Cody Schock, who are running 10th and 11th at the time, before immediately relinquishing the spot to Cooper. He passes his way up to 7th before being docked 3 spots to end up right back at 10th. Going by AMA's own rule, they considered Cameron's cut to have been the reason he came out in front of Cooper and Schock, docking him those 2 positions back, plus an additional 1-spot penalty. Start Your System's Kellen Brower showed on Twitter how much real estate Cameron actually covered before rejoining, showing that McAdoo would have actually saved time and distance if he could have just got the bike pointed in the right direction. But alas, rules are rules, and he did indeed cut a straight shot directly from his point of turnaround to the point of the next track. but it's refreshing to see consistency with AMA's rulings here. Obviously, McAdoo rejoining the middle of a whoop section would be reckless and irresponsible, but I think the appropriate play here would have been to at least follow down to the corner of the whoops and enter at the beginning of the next start instead of angling to the end of it. Either way, another example of a competitor running off of adrenaline, thinking like a caveman and forgetting that there are rules and cameras. He gave up the spot to Cooper anyway, and got penalized additionally for it, a move that gained him nothing and instead cost him the red plate. Now let's look at the most peculiar of the bunch, Jason Anderson's blazing speed down the whoops in the 450 main. I really have no logical explanation for this one, other than I am not surprised at all that it was Jason Anderson pulling this. He officially left the track in 11th and rejoined the track in 11th. A net zero difference, but as the rule states, even a net zero carries a 1-spot penalty. I can't believe we have 3 penalties in an AMA race and they were all enforced similarly, fairly, and consistently. Wow. If there's one thing I don't agree with here, it's Anderson's. He took himself off of the racing surface by choice, rockets unsafely near AMA staff, past one of the most difficult obstacles on the course as if they aren't there, and continues his push. His line took only 4.3 seconds from the point of the first whoop to the point of re-entry, where Vince Freeze, the rider who was also stopped in front of him, took 6.6 seconds to go the same distance. That's a blatant and flagrant foul, but I guess in the end we wouldn't change the final score as Anderson was nearly 10 seconds ahead of 8th place Ferrandis, but this definitely is the reason he was able to catch and pass Aaron Plessinger on the last lap. At least the penalty did wipe out that pass, but with his clear intent and just how egregious the move was, I'm a little surprised that he didn't get just a little bit more. So after this race experience of the AMA going literally by the book, similar to what happened to Roczen during the second round of the season, how do you feel about the penalties levied here? Let me know in the comments if you think that going by a flat rulebook penalties is the way to keep it consistent, or if you think Little Mac and Team Pride should have had their penalties adjusted due to the scope and intent. Don't forget to follow at RotoMoto on Twitter and Instagram for qualifying insights, injury updates, stats, and banner as the race goes on, and of course those ever important fantasy cheat sheets if you are a player of PulpMX Fantasy. And if you want even more help making your picks, be sure to check out and subscribe to RotoMoto on Patreon for access to the enhanced cheat sheets, chock full of more data than you can imagine to help make those huge point picks. I want to give a shout out to the current Patreon supporters. This channel is made possible by good people like Sam, Mike F, and Travis Marks. Thank you as always for watching RotoMoto. My name is Donnie. Keep it pinned to the weekend.